welcome to this. My name's Dorothy Rowe, and I'm so happy you've come to join me for this webinar on good and evil. It's a very interesting topic and timely, I would say. I'd like to start just by giving a brief overview of what is energy healing for the new people, and then we'll take a 3-minute dive into the silence of our own being, and I'll explain why, and then a little recap after that, a prayer of gratitude and a little recap of yesterday's session, and then dive into today's session. Okay, so what is energy healing? Energy healing is born of the realization that consciousness affects matter. Basically, that everything is essentially consciousness. Everything comes from the one divine source of creation. And if the body falls ill, I'm not saying that we should not go visit the Western doctor. Obviously, Western medicine has a tremendous value and it's developed over thousands of years. So, in all honor and respect for Western medicine, but approaching problems from the level of consciousness has a value. Underneath the illness, at deeper, more abstract levels of one's own field of expression, there are reasons why the illness came. And uncovering those reasons and resolving those reasons is extremely powerful and extremely useful for the healing process. Whether you're in addition taking Western medications or procedures or whatever suits. Some people like herbs, just what suits. But anyway, so energy healing is about using awareness or attention to dive into the fine, subtle fabrics of the ocean of consciousness and extract out what is that seed or what is that root of the illness. So what I'm providing here in these webinars and being with you, and we're demonstrating together, we're actually doing it together in the webinars, is diving in, taking that dive and looking at both the landscape, like making sense of that inner landscape so that you feel more proficient in navigating that landscape. Because my desire, my intention is that we all become really, really good at understanding how to direct awareness in a way that results in very, very positive, life-supporting, healthful effects. So part of the story is the navigational map, which is one of the things I provide. And the other part of the story is, what do you do when you get there? So that's what we do. And so the whole idea of the webinars is it's more of like a bit of a hands-on experiential approach that we're doing it together. And I'm explaining what we're doing so that you have the opportunity to experience it, but then also have a sort of intellectual framework for what you are experiencing, because sometimes those experiences at those very abstract levels of consciousness can be confusing and they're not always comfortable, right? And so it's important to travel safely, right? It's important to know our limits and in the context of that landscape. Anyway, so that's really what I'm providing, what I see myself as providing in these workshops, in these webinars. Sorry, I do workshops too, so webinars, workshops. But anyway, in the workshop is, providing a navigational map, providing an intellectual understanding of the experience and enjoying the experiences together. And I picked up this topic, I picked the topics months in advance, and I did that because I didn't know where we would be collectively at this time, but I realized that it was perfect. So God bless. All right, there's the description of energy healing. Now we take a few minutes of silence, and the whole purpose of the few minutes of silence is to give everyone together, collectively as a group, a chance to settle our awareness down a little bit, to dive the focus of awareness, attention inside, and just to kind of, say hello to the inner landscape. It's a time to say hello to the inner landscape. And for those of you who are proficient and familiar, to say hello to the source of creation, which is at the root, it's the anchor within each one of us. Because, of course, there isn't anything that hasn't come from the source of creation. So that being us, right? All right. Let me just raise that up a little bit. That's a little better. Okay. I'll ask you to close the eyes. I'll let you know when 3 minutes is up. Take a minute or so to come out slowly. No need to rush out of that lovely experience. All right, let's close our eyes. All right. Let's take a few moments before opening the eyes. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything. Thank you for being all of us and all of the universe. Thank you for being that essential connection between the silent, eternal, and manifest field of all that is and the entire range of its expression, the connection between the unmanifest and the manifest. Thank you for our webinar hour. May we use this time in the most meaningful, valuable, helpful, powerful, sacred way. Thank you to each one of you for inviting me into your life and giving me the opportunity to be the voice of our collective, giving me the opportunity to sit with you at this time. I really appreciate it. All right. So, a little recap from yesterday. When I was thinking about the recap this morning, my thought was, well, the one thing I didn't do yesterday that I really should have was give a bit of a definition of good and evil. That would be useful. Yeah, this is about healing for good and evil and dealing with that, the relationship perspective, a perspective on good and evil and energy healing webinar. So, there's a connection, a relationship between evolution and truth and good and evil. Essentially, good aligns with truth and evil aligns with anything that covers up or deteriorates or corrupts truth, essentially. There's also a factor of evolution because evolution has some different values. I had to look at, I use the word evolution a lot, right? And I thought I understood what it meant, but when I went in to do this workshop, this webinar, I realized, well, it's a little more nuanced than I thought. So these are the thoughts that came up to me. There is when truth is presenting itself in the material field, when it's becoming more and more integrated with this material world that we know, this supports life. So the relationship of truth with the material field of creation as becoming like closer and closer united, like that, closer where what we see in the material reflects what is in the very truth that's deep in the source of creation, then that's very life supporting. And anytime we get situations where the truth is covered up or it's only partial, or a situation where the truth was present and it gets replaced by ignorance, then we define it as human beings. This is not good. This is not good when this happens. But evolution has another value as well, other than just whether it's life supporting or not life supporting. And that is that evolution also flows on these waves of expansion and contraction. So you can have the unification of truth, pure truth, truth with a capital T, right? That unification of truth with the material level of creation. And it's like making progress, right? It's expanding. It's becoming more unified, more integrated. Sometimes I use the word integrated when I'm talking about our bodies, right? Our bodies becoming better and better expressions of the truth of our nature, which is divinity showing up as human form in order to experience its own reality through the instruments of our human bodies. So that becoming more and more and more, right? So that, and it ties right into a really great question that I was just looking at a second ago, see if I can find it. So there's expansion and contraction. And obviously, if the values or if the boundaries and barriers of this material field that are blocking truth contract, right? If they become less and less and less, then what that means is it's creating a context for more and more truth to come forward. But you can have it in either way. You can have the integration of truth can slow down. So, and sometimes that needs to happen. Sometimes it needs to go slower so we can savor every little yummy nuance of the truth. As it's integrating, it slows down a little bit. Maybe it even slows down slower than the flow or the trajectory of universal evolution at the moment. And when that happens, it can feel like a person stopped evolving. And I think that happens for a lot of women around the time of menopause, because the types of changes that happen in a woman's body cause her to have to slow down in a way. And it can make her feel as if she stopped evolving, when in fact she didn't. It's just that her personal, like the speed at which some of the functions are taking place, slow down a little bit, and they can slow down slower than the evolutionary trajectory of the universe around. And then it feels like, ooh, then one can, then when that happens, and this is actually healing for everyone, it's a download for everyone, not to let those moments be confused with non-evolution, because the evolution is still happening. And what happens is, if you're evolving at the exact same pace as the universal field around you, then you're basically just staying steady. You're just keeping up. You're not actually, pushing ahead. And so it doesn't even necessarily feel like evolution, but it is. Evolution is actually happening at every point in creation. And there are those times where we have to slow down, at least in areas where we were accustomed to moving forward. So there's a tendency, and this is an old tendency that goes back for many, many generations. So this is for the ancestors as well as for us. But that tendency, when those moments occur, that a slowing down of the evolutionary process sets in, then it can cue or like trigger, it can trigger or cue a response of having failed and not being good enough, and somehow making backwards progress, actually going backwards in evolution. And like, this is not the case. Evolution moves forward. This is the universe. This is the ever expanding universe that we live in. Evolution moves forward. Even if you hit a really rough patch in the road, it's still moving forward. So this identification, and this is the ancestors, this is the thing, is that as soon as that experience comes up, and then those habits of thinking, oh my gosh, I've fallen, I'm a fallen creature, then the identification of oneself as fallen kicks in, and it's really not good. That's the moment when the larger forces in creation need to rise up. They rise up and they get you, and they say, you know what, you need to come home now. You need to restructure things a bit. And sometimes that whole "you're coming home now" restructuring can be a little awkward or uncomfortable. And there's purification in that, because you're coming home, you need to restructure, means you got to let go of some things that you were attached to, and so forth. So it is. So it is that the evolution is constantly happening, but there are these sort of kind of more like fringe experiences or side experiences that create the illusion that you've stopped evolving or you're not evolving. And it's just that the force of evolution that's going on in creation is so big that sometimes we slow down a little bit, but that's okay, because we get more details when we slow down. All right. I wanted to bring in this great question. So, so one of the first parts of the question is, how can it be? And she kind of answers it herself, but how can it be that if the divine is completely good and is everything, which is love and goodness and light, can also contain evil and darkness? And in this part of the question, the principle is that, and maybe it doesn't. And the truth is that everything comes from the light. And another lady sent in an experience, which I won't read you, it's very long, but basically her experience was fighting a demon at a point when she was in a coma. And what came out of that experience was she was victorious in that battle, and the demon completely transformed and said, yes, everything is the light. Everything is the light. But And God is love. That was the other thing the demon said. God is love and everything is light. Oh, so, but there can be moments when like isolated parts or aspects of the creation experience themselves as separate from the light, as separate from that one great divine source. And when anything gets into that place where it feels separate, then that's when behaviors and choices and decisions can creep in that are not life supporting. So that the value of being life supporting is sort of like an important principle. And right, I'm defining in this context, I'm defining life supporting as any time that the absolute truth, like the one divine truth, the source of creation, pure truth, integrates or becomes more closely, coherently connected to what is we think of as the relative material field of creation, whether that's the gross material relative field of creation or the subtle levels of material creation. Anywhere that marriage is happening, that's life supporting. Okay, so what so yeah, some part did the opposite of that, right? Instead of becoming married to the truth and being unified with the truth, it's like I'm separate from the truth. And that I'm separate from the truth then defines that form as a form that's has a tendency, will have a tendency to not function in a way that's going to be good for people. It can function in a way that's life damaging, causes suffering. Well, oh, there I go. It's no longer fuzzy. But anyway, yeah, all the levels of illusion. And I think even this has come up because it's only an effect of the illusory field of creation, which is the material field of creation, has the potential to create illusion. Okay. So, and to create the illusion that there is separation, because there isn't really. Okay. So she says this really sweet thing. There are those who consider human experience to be akin to dreaming. And whether the dream is a sweet one or a nightmare, the deepest reality we can wake up to is that everything and everyone is always safe and good. And yes, that's absolutely right. So you invited us to reposition. This is the point I wanted to bring up. You invited us to reposition ourselves on the spectrum of ego such that we identify less with what makes us unique, this small self, and more with what makes us universal self. Actually, that's not quite what I said. So thank you for bringing that up because I would like to clarify that point. Ultimately, the ego incorporates or it embraces the entire spectrum. So we are absolutely completely unique and we are absolutely completely universal. And that both they marry each other and they're together and they're like unified in that, so that we're absolutely human and we're absolutely divine at the same time, and it's really, really, really okay. It's okay to be both. And she said, wouldn't doing so impact us, wouldn't doing so free us from the impact of evil? So I think the implication there is that it's the unique individual divine self which somehow harbors evilness um, or would be the gateway to letting evil come in or something like that. And no, I don't think so. The individual self is so deeply cherished by the universal level of oneself because the individual aspect of self provides an anchor to the material field of creation, which the universal is. It's its play field. The play field of the divine, of the one universal divine self, is the material field of creation. So the more interesting it is, the more diverse it is, the more specific it is, in a way, the better, right? Even if mistakes are made, but again, we're defining here that mistakes come from anything that tends to separate absolute truth from the material expression. Okay, so thinking of layers of density chart, do a healing that would facilitate identification with the least dense value of self so that we recognize that what is eternal to the human dream is always good and ultimately in our favor. Yeah. And I would say, just to reframe that a little bit, healing to bring together and unify that universal absolute aspect of self with everything that is unique and individual and specific about each one of us, and how they come together. And one of the principles here is that our bodies hold like a blueprint, or they hold like a field of impressions of everything that's really specific and unique about each one of us. And so really what this is bringing together the source of creation with the physical form. Like, that's our most outward expression, right? Our most material dense expression of each one of us, what makes us so unique. And of all the parts, it would be like the face, especially. Oof, right? Everybody's face is different. It's different. Right? You see like 1,000 pictures of hands, and like they can kind of look sort of similar, but faces all look different. So we kind of carry the egoic element in the face. And so we're just taking a moment and putting attention on the face, on the head, the hair, and the ears, and on the physical and etheric level of the physiology here. Because the etheric face is also unique, right? It's also all levels of oneself are, but right now we're bringing together the absolute, unbounded, divine level of creation with the most unique aspects of the material level of self. I'm just looking into the field, seeing all your sweet faces and the etheric faces. And it's interesting, the etheric faces contain features or characteristics of all the faces you have ever carried. Like, I never saw that before. This is why I do the work webinars, you guys, because with everybody's light shining, oh boy, as more is seen, more is seen. So yeah, the etheric faces contain characteristics. First of all, the etheric body is more malleable than the physical body, right? So it moves, it responds to consciousness more, it's like more pliable. But also, in each person's etheric face are all the faces of all the bodies that you have ever possessed. And you know what I see? This, I never really did the recap from yesterday, did I? No, I didn't. I guess we'll have to go back and watch that video. But I see something that references from yesterday, and that is the compassion, which is inherent in the nature of the human soul, the sweetness, the face of the Mother of Mercy within each one of us. And as that aspect of creation comes into focus of our awareness, it integrates. It integrates into each face, that sweetness. I was talking with a friend this morning, and he said, do you have to get ready before your webinar? And I'm like, I put on a very small amount of, it's very minuscule, very, very small amount of makeup. And he said, no, you should never need to do that, because he said, you're through the pores of your skin, all the radiance of light comes. It was a very sweet thing to say. That truth, that light, it does radiate through the pores. Even if there is like a little bit of it right here, it kind of darkened my eyebrow. No, anyway, yeah. So it is. So it is. And just enjoying the flow of that divine grace coming through the face. You don't have to say anything. I mentioned yesterday a movie that's recently come out. I wasn't expecting, but it did at the time that we're doing this webinar on good and evil. And the timing could not have been more perfect, because the movie is a reenactment of true life experiences of a man who chose in this lifetime to go into the deepest, absolutely darkest pits of evil on this earth and save children. That's what he did. That's what he does. He's a real life person. His name is Tim Ballard, and the movie's name is Sound of Freedom. And the reason I'm mentioning that is it ties into another question, which is one person asked about, they said they were going to go see the movie. And they said, and because we talked about it a little bit yesterday, and I'll watch me again not be able to find that question. Oh, no, there it is. Okay. And because the subject matter is so dark, I know that there are some of you out there that did the same thing I did. Said, oh, the subject matter is so hideously dark, I'm not going to go see that movie. I would be scarred if I saw that movie. But then the universe rose up to change my mind, because I questioned. It's good to question, because the first response is, well, I know my nervous system. I know how sensitive I am. I tend to be somewhat empathic, and I, feel people's feelings and things like that. And so I knew that going into that movie and watching a reenactment of that would be brutal, emotionally brutal. And it was. But it also gave me an opportunity to rise up. And I described how I did that yesterday. But she would like a little bit more, because she wasn't going to go see the movie. Now she is. And by the way, guys, before I go into this, I just have to say one more thing having to do with truth, which is that in the end, truth will always, especially if it really is true, will always have an evolutionary effect. So what we're really doing is we're working with both the physiology and the consciousness to establish so much stability and adaptability in the physiology that there is no truth that you cannot look at. There is no truth you cannot look at, even if it's a dark truth. And so that brings us to, what do you do about that? What do you do if you're facing a darkness? It's really, really rough. It has an energy signature. It has a feeling signature. My sweet lady, who didn't ask a question, but she just gave, the one who fought the demon, remember? She said at one point, she experienced it as a force field so massive that there was no seeing around it, and so mighty that she felt exceedingly tiny, like an atomic particle. It was so dark. It looked so dark and so extremely heavy that she knew that its appearance was designed to make her cower. But she didn't. She came at it, and she said this very beautiful thing. There was a little prayer. Well, actually, she didn't. Her prayer is God is love. That was her prayer. God is love, and she just walked right to it. God is love, and the whole thing resolved, which was lovely. So that's one simple way you could address this. You can just be there, and any time or any point in the movie that's rough, you can just start singing to yourself on the inside, God is love. What I did was I looked at each element of the darkness one at a time. The feeling of it is a very, very heavy feeling. It's a very painful feeling to look at. By the way, the movie isn't explicit in any way. No children were hurt in the making of this movie. It was very, very crafted, in a very refined manner. It's a PG-13. But some of the emotions that people go through are very heavy. And I was experiencing the darkness of the feelings from a position, a self-positioning, my awareness positioned or seated or anchored into the source of creation. So I'm looking at the darkness, but I am sitting in wholeness. I am sitting in the light. And so looking at the darkness, but sitting in the light means that I'm like a flashlight, right? You're like a flashlight. You're shining your light on that thing. That is really all that I did. It's very, very simple because the light itself brings the resolution. The light knows in each case the specific type or feel or flavor of the darkness, what's required on that flavor of darkness, what needs to shift. And by seating awareness in the light, that gives us and that gives you or me or whoever puts themselves in that situation. Or if you have an abuser, oh, that's another great example, a great time to seat yourself in the light. And then as you navigate through the experience with it, the specific impulses of intelligence, of divine intelligence, that precisely rehabilitate the darkness, rise up. And when you're seated in wholeness, you get to enjoy watching those mechanics unfold within the field of your own consciousness. Because the source of creation, which is infinite and bounded, eternal, is also within us. And that darkness that my friend described, like so big, she felt like an atom next to it, it was like so big and so dark, also was experienced essentially internally. So it's not that you are that darkness, it's that the divine is showing up as the whole universe, you and everything else in the universe. I mean, obviously, you and I, all of us, are the type of person that would, if faced with the type of darkness that the movie brings up, we would be on the side of light. We'd be like the hero in the movie, right? And that's what's really nice about the movie. It defines the darkness. Here's the darkness. And then it shows this is this heroic man, and this is how he's handling it. And he wins. I mean, this man has saved thousands and thousands of children. Thousands, yeah. Although, unfortunately, there are more out there that still need to be saved, which is why we're here doing this work, right? We're doing this work because we are, as he describes, you'll see dozens of interviews. The name Tim Ballard, I said it before. You'll see dozens of interviews with Tim Ballard online and on YouTube these days. And he'll describe these phenomenal miracles that take place when he's actually liberating children from these situations. And it cannot, that type of miracle cannot happen without the work that we're doing, which is to go into the darkness and then to offer it to the light, essentially, and then to allow the mechanics of the intelligence of creation, the source of creation itself, to go to work on that darkness and to rehabilitate it and to resolve it and to complete it and to turn it around so that it shows up in this field, in this material field, whether it's a subtle form like the one my girlfriend was fighting, or whether it's a very material form in the form of, a human trafficker or whatever. But that form has to undergo a transformation. That form has to be purified. It has to let go of its attachments, right? Settling awareness into the source of creation. You are always 100% safe when the awareness is settled into the source of creation. Even if something catastrophic is happening on the surface, your soul, your being is safe in the source of creation. It is that one eternal light. And from there, we bring that darkness into focus, that big darkness. And the light already rose up even before we started. It is that Mother of Mercy, Mother of Compassion, Mother Mary, Kuan Yin, so many names. Pangaya has been given names in every culture, in every religion, in every tradition. But that quality of unconditional love and also immeasurable power to transform anything that is dark back into light, that is an essential component of our nature. And you are even bigger than that. Say, well, no, that's wrong, right? It's wrong to like try to lift yourself up above God. We're not lifting ourselves up above God. The individual self, yeah, we're about as big as an atom compared to all that. But our roots through the field of our consciousness, our roots go right into the source of creation. And all these archetypal forms, whether it's the mother of compassion or whether it's the savior or, the wise teacher or whatever, all of these forms are expressions of our nature deep inside. Yes, on the surface, we are small humans and we're mortal. We are 100% human. And we are also 100% divine. So what happens is knowing that part, that expression of universal intelligence is a part of us. We find it. If you're not sure, put your hands over your heart center. You can feel right in. Where is that mother of compassion energy? There it is. I know that feeling, being held in the loving arms of mother, completely safe, or father. If you like the male version, the father energy, being held in the loving arms, the forgiveness, the protection, right? That protective energy, so beautiful. And it rises up and it meets that darkness. And the darkness feels like it can finally trust for the first time. It can trust a relationship with wholeness. And the darkness that fuels this terrible industry, we'll call it an industry, which at this point has surpassed, what do they say? It's surpassed the drug industry. Tom, you watched that interview. It surpassed the drug industry. It's surpassing the arms industry. It's one of the biggest industry, multi-billion dollar industry on earth. That darkness, that big darkness. I mean, this is way beyond destroying lives. This is like destroying the very fabric of culture, right? Destroys families, everything. It's a big darkness. And that big compassion that's even bigger comes to meet it. And the problem was, it was coming from, I'm seeing the seed or core of it, right? That's what we always do in energy healing. You just go down to the seed. And the seed is a seed of self-identification, so deeply self-identified as separate, so deeply self-identified as separate from the source of creation. And not just that, but like, I would say anger and resentment toward the source of creation. Like, I'll show you. And that's the very same energy that's behind mass shooters as well. It's like wanting to punish God, wanting to punish. And that's the energy of that actually comes from the illusion of feeling like you're bigger than God, right? So do you guys see? Do you see how the mechanics revealed themselves even when we were in it? That point that came up, that everybody here sunk into that point, that is that as individuals, we live within the confines of the constraints of space and time, and we're really individually with our little bodies, we're kind of small. The body, the antenna is small, and we're absolutely, completely 100% that. And it's beautiful, even if it's imperfect, even if we define it as, oh, gee, that curl should have gone the other way or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And completely 100% access to the divine, the power of divine grace within us. Both. And that's what's missing from the perpetrators. That's what they're missing. They're so lost in, I'm separate from the source of creation. I'm separate from, right? Like anybody who could do something cruel to somebody else on that caliber thinks that I'm separate. I can do this horrible thing to this other person and it's not going to hurt me. I'm going to be fine. And at the same time, they put themselves above God And they say, and it satisfies my need to punish God because I see the divine in these innocent children. The marriage between the divine and individual, the marriage between the divine and the individual brings those forms, brings that form of darkness back into a unified relationship with divinity. People don't want to hurt themselves. They don't want to hurt themselves. They think they're getting away with something, and they're not going to be hurt. They're going to come out on top. They're going to come out rich. That's what they think. Temporarily rich in money, eternally poor, right? They don't want to hurt themselves. The desire to not hurt oneself now extends to the relationship with the divine within them. Because really, that's the relationship that's in question with that level of darkness. It's not a question of the relationship between perpetrators and victims. It is a question of the relationship between the individual and the divine source, inescapable relationship, eternal relationship. It was like there was a divorce, and it needed to be there needed to be some reunification, some reuniting there. It's opening, it's opening, it's opening. And so what we notice, for those of you who are sensitive to how the energy starts to shift and change, right there in the deep, deep gap between the absolute and the relative, the shifting is happening. And it's just, for me, often I feel it in my main energy centers. I feel it in the head and the heart and the gut center. I also often feel it in the chakras specifically. It's expressed, the transformation is expressed in the way the energy turns in those areas. And solar plexus sometimes will become just a little bit extra energy in the solar plexus. Sometimes here too. It's turning. Beautiful. Okay, that question. There's a lot of questions, you guys. So I want to make sure that I try to get to everybody. Maybe I'll do one up here. Healing for ancestors that encountered evil. His father was an administrative officer in charge of the Dachau war crimes trials, right? I remember you telling me that, and I know this affected him. One reason he was so focused on his family and his faith. And I think this, for our precious ancestors who feel as if they were scarred, or touched by darkness, it comes to how the encounter resulted in specific actions and self-transformation that is life supporting. And honestly, your father did that. This man's father was such a beautiful man. He was a writer and just wrote beautifully, so nice. And honestly, he became wiser through the experience. I would say what has been seen cannot be unseen on the one hand, but on the other hand, as long as the vision carries a little element of darkness in it, it means that the vision has a potential to extract even more light to the surface in you. And I'm saying it to you, but I'm saying it to your dad too, right? At the same time. It's like, as he goes back, if he's reviewing, because it's quite like a kind of paradox, it's like a lose-lose situation, that obviously these people had to come to trial. There was no question that what they had done was unspeakably terrible. But in the same stroke, and that means that he had to make choices and decisions that caused suffering for them. But in the same stroke, making those choices and decisions is something that he carries. Like his actions affected that. But zooming out into the largest possible perspective, his he can look at the dynamics of that whole situation as a way that the divine was showing up on both sides of the aisle as a way of creating balance. And a lot of balance did need to be created in the world at that time. And those souls made those choices. Those people who were sentenced in the Dachau war crimes trials, like their souls knew before they came to the earth that they were going to play that part, that they were going to play that role, and that they were going to be instrumental in a lot of people suffering. And the people that came and suffered, their souls also knew on some level. I mean, when you're here and you're in the body, and we forget so much when we go through the birth experience, it feels new. It feels new, and there's a part of one that thinks, "Oh, I don't know what's going to happen next," but there is also a part of us, right? That's the individual part. And then there's the more universal part that does know what's going to happen next, and that chose that as a collective experiment, essentially, to help reestablish. The idea was to help reestablish balance on Earth. And I mean, I think it might have helped a little, but it clearly didn't get rid of all the darkness, because as statistics that arose from the current situation, there's far more people in positions of slavery today than there were ever in the history that we know of, the recorded history, when people were recording such things. You can certainly say during the 300 years that there was that the Western world was drawing individuals out of Africa, is many, 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 many more people are enslaved today. Many more. Millions are enslaved today. So it needs to change. It needs to change. But for your father, it was a zoom out and look at the big picture and accept that he chose and they chose, and that ultimately he did turn those moments in his life when he was making decisions that he knew was going to hurt somebody, that he made up for that a million times over. And also that those souls selected to go through that experience at a cosmic level as part of the sacrifice of the time. And we're in a similar time now where it's very likely that there are going to be, things like that could happen. So the principle here is to remaining in the zoomed out, more universal perspective, to allow that gracious compassion to come forward and to soften the unfoldment of the evolution of each soul who's involved. So in the case of individuals who've done very terrible things, which will bring me to another question, even for them, some value of compassion is present because the divine was acting through them. It brings me to another point, another question. This is basically for your father, it's all about perspective. And that perspective provides him with the understanding of what a beautiful soul he is, and how the perspective of how the changes that he made after, you said he focused on family and faith, and how those changes that he made afterwards have such profound impact on our world, even today, going on to the next generations. Absolutely beautiful. And a couple of webinars ago, at least 2 months ago, maybe more, my beautiful friend who's with us today, thank you for being here in Europe, asked, well, could we do a healing for large corporations? Because it seems that there is at the corporate level of our world certain choices and first of all, a huge amount of power. First, right? Like a lot of wealth. And we all know it doesn't take very much wealth to sustain a human life, really. And so when individuals become so wealthy, they have so much wealth, they are no longer motivated by wealth. And then they become motivated by power. And there are organizations and corporations in our world. I have a wall. Thank you to my friend who gave me the idea to make a wall. And he sent me the pictures of all the different corporations who have been involved in various doings around our world over the last few years. And what level of evil is there. And when you go into those corporations, there are beautiful people who work for them, really bringing the light. You know, the individuals, it's not an individual, it's not at the individual level, it's at a very high level. My son explained it to me that the people at the very high level travel a lot. And when they travel a lot, they see the effects of capitalism around the world in lots of different places. And they realize that, they pick up on the struggling and the suffering that other people have been through. And it makes them sort of less committed and less, I would say, less patriotic, more thinking in terms of, couldn't we create or provide a sort of idealistic situation for everybody, on a sort of ideal situation for everybody on earth? And then they realize, well, the only way to do that is to literally break down whatever structure is here. We need to break it down all the way down to its roots. And that means breaking down the family structure as well, like break everything entirely apart in order to build up this idealized vision. But the problem is that the idealized vision is still based on individual construction of what an idealized vision for the world should or could be, rather than what we're doing when we do energy healing, right? What do we do in energy healing? We bring awareness down to the source of creation. And the darkness is there, the light of the source of creation is there. They come together, they interact. And the way the interaction unfolds is not based on individual idea of how that should unfold, but it unfolds based on the intelligence and the creativity and the intentions of the divine. And then we get to sit back and go, oh, wow, I never thought of it that way. And being able to be in that position to be actively engaged with the transformations that take place that exceed expectations is beautiful. But the problem is the people that get up into those really high positions, they don't want to do that. Or maybe they don't know to do that. You know, maybe they're just ignorant, but they're getting their own ideas of how things are supposed to change. And for them at this time, that means the destruction of all structure, right down to even the very most fundamental structures that we have in this world as human beings, as tiny infants. The first, like the crossbars of the scaffolding of how we understand reality, is male, female, parent, child. Even before their speech, even in the first days of life, the baby's like, this one be my mommy, this one be my daddy, right? Or if daddy's not there, this one be my mommy. But male, female, parent, child. And so even these truths are being ripped apart at their seams right now. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. So those big structures, those big corporations, the premise that it's not possible to bring awareness down to the source of creation, the premise that somehow the divine intention for how things should change is inaccessible to us. We will never know it. We can never know it. Lots of attachments are clearing and purifying. Lots of attachments to being in control of every little detail, attachments to fulfilling wants, not needs, wants filling those cravings and wants and addictions. And so instant fulfillment of cravings, addictions, and wants, because a lot of time that's a fueling energy. At that, people have all the money in the world. Like, is there anything they can't have? They can have anything, anything. The problem is it requires a little letting go. That's the problem. It requires saying, we'll just see what divine being wants. We'll see what the source of creation would like to do in this situation. And there's some people that just don't feel comfortable with that. There's a blockage right there. I see it. I see it as an energy form in the field. So we just put the attention on that. It's interesting because that particular blockage is a blockage that would almost necessarily inhibit the energy healing process, right? Because the energy healing process literally pivots on this principle of allowing the divine, the source of creation, to provide the guidance or the to administrate the transformation. So why would the divine create a blockage to its own function? I'm asking being, because that's what that is. That's what that is. Like, I don't want to let the divine do anything. I'm bigger. To me, it looks like divine intervention. It looks like a kind of comeuppance that when a person's stuck, when they're really stuck on that spot, they can't get off that spot unless the universe swoops around from behind and kind of, comes around and bites them in the back, so to say. So what we're doing as our energy healing collective is we're offering the perspective of the pure embodiment of mercy and how that process can unfold in a way which does not overwhelm the system. This is really, really important, you guys, because when the people at the very top get angry and they feel threatened, they just start a world war. They can just do that. That's within their range and their power. So we don't want them to feel threatened or overwhelmed. We want the truth. We want the truth to come to the surface in a way that is palatable and digestible and very gracefully helps turn the hearts of these individuals around so that they care more. They care more about that pure truth coming forward and blossoming in this world than about feeding their addictions, than about maintaining necessarily their power. Because I think it's possible that some people who are in positions of power might have to take a break from that. It's possible. And anyway, power, like that's, they got all the money in the world. Now they don't care about money. Then they have all the power in the world. Well, then they get a lesson that, power also isn't the most, it's not the be all and the end all. Right? How about becoming like a saint, like an angel, and doing such good on this earth? Blessing, leaving a legacy of good on this earth. How about that? That would be a really nice thing to do. And I mean, part of the story is that, that vision, that big corporate vision is we're going to do what we want to do. And to do it, we have to literally destroy everything that's of value, essentially, on this earth. And so then we're coming back to them with the healing that's like, you need to do what you need to do in a way that doesn't destroy you, that doesn't overwhelm your nervous system, that's not incredibly stressful, but that's graceful and easy and compassionate. So we're providing essentially a blueprint. I'm seeing the energy signature. I'm seeing the shift. And here's the shift. And it's just happening. And I don't know, every time I say see, but it's really more like experiencing it viscerally, well, sort of a whole field of consciousness experience, finest level of perception experience. I see forms activating at the causal level of our physiologies of creation that we would associate with saints, particular saints. Beautiful beings, beautiful archetypal forms of consciousness, saints, like the intelligence in the causal body that's able to, it's like an overseeing intelligence for like scribes and teachers, like that. Gurus, teachers, archivists of the truth, right? Those who are responsible for the truth. And it's this form, this beautiful, beautiful form that Valmiki, I think that would be Valmiki in Sanskrit, right? The archivist of the stories of the truth, coming, like activating in the field of our consciousness that has the profound capacity to bring the truth to the surface in a way that is digestible, that is accessible, that supports its maximum integration with the heart and the mind. And that's what we're going for. We're going after the heart and the mind. These individuals, the heart and the mind, a little shifting there, a little shifting. And they have to let go a little bit of attachments, but that's okay. Because when you let go of things that you were gripping onto, you feel lighter. You actually feel better and lighter. What's important in this world? It's a lot. It's a big shifting. It's still going. It's still going. But I'm going to keep moving on because I got questions. Is Earth the only planet in the universe with good and evil? Oh, no. Good and evil is in all parts of creation, for sure. They kind of balance each other out. In fact, not just like on the planet Earth, but also like in the subtle realms of creation, it's found in this causal level, like I talked about the saint just now, but there are forms down there, like the one that my friend was fighting, that are like not physical forms, just energy forms. And they're all going home. They all are attracted to the same thing, which is the source of creation, the self with a big S, the big self, the big source of creation. Oh, here's a question. I love you, Dorothy. Oh, you're so sweet. Oh God, thank you. Psychology professor said that customers of this industry desire that we unite with purity, simplicity, and innocence. Let's heal them. No customers, no industry. That's right. That's right. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. Yes, the people who are paying, the fact there's an industry because there's an addiction. Right. So actually, I was kind of slightly addressing that when I was also talking about healing the hearts and minds of the leaders of the big corporations on Earth as well. But that tendency toward, because it's the same healing, essentially. It's I see myself as separate from this person who I'm exploiting. So I can hurt them, and that doesn't hurt me. And that's actually not correct. But as long as that separation element is there, as long as they see them as a separate entity, then, and they don't find the divine in that individual as much as also in themselves. And it's because it's not that they don't see the divine in their victims, because the victims are beautiful. They're beautiful because they're so innocent and they're so divine. But it's because inside oneself, inside the perpetrators, there's such a separation from that level of innocence and sweetness and purity that it has driven them to the point of feeling resentful toward God. And it's like, I'm going to do this because I'm going to get back at God. It's a very dark, it's a very, very dark feeling. So that structure, or that feeling of feeling like putting oneself up above the divine, which is impossible, really. If you think about it for a second, that can never happen. But anyway, putting themselves up as if the judge of God, and feeling justified to victimize God's children as a way of hurting God. It's the unification deep within the heart and mind, deep within the soul of the individual, that you can never be away from God. Whatever you do to God's children, you do to yourself. It's that. Hello. Flies sometimes come around. It's like a little piece of little bit of darkness, right? It's like sometimes they'll carry it on their backs. They're really sweet creatures, really, but slightly exploitative too. So the energy of exploitation, there's an addiction, and it's hardwired into the brain of getting a dopaminergic hit out of the act of exploitation. I had not seen that before. I mean, I hadn't verbalized it before. I obviously saw it as an energy structure, but so that wiring, that hard wiring, it's shifting. It's just shifting. Yeah. And this is touching the next question too, which is, he disagrees that the people who do bad deeds think it's okay to do the bad deeds. He thinks that they're so lost and they're so filled with hate that they figure they're kind of done for. So they simply don't care about the consequences. Yeah, that's when a person's casting judgments on God. So healing that. And unfortunately, we have to stop there. And there were still a bunch of questions. I love you guys' questions. So I'm sorry I didn't get to all of them. But my sweetheart who had asked me the question 2 webinars ago about the corporations, I'm so glad we got to do the healing for that today. So hopefully some of the questions that were in your mind for this, sometimes you guys, I don't get hardly any questions. I get one question or no questions. But this time I got a lot of questions. So I didn't get to them all. Please forgive me. But we did. Oh, and I would like to just, for the lady who did ask the question about the corporations, I'd like to just give a quick shout out to a corporation that's out of India, right? It's called On Passive. And it's a corporation that decided to found their entire structure on doing good in the world, and to use as a sort of like part of their mission statement. And part of their whole premise is that there are so many corporations that become corrupt when they become very, very powerful, that they wanted to create a corporation that was founded on principles of evolution and goodness and the unification of truth with the forms of this creation and all that is evolutionary and bright. So I just thought I'd give a shout out to On Passive. You can check them out. All right, everybody. Thank you for being with me today. I went a few minutes over, just a couple, but not too bad. And it was so sweet to be with you. So sweet to be here. All of you. I love it. Thank you for the lady who sent me the hearts and everybody. And yeah, I hope to continue to sort of work into a lot of these points and questions as we go forward into the next webinars as well. So thank you all for everything. And I love you dearly. And I'm so glad that we got to spend this time together and do these big, powerful healings for our world. It's really important. Thank you. Bye-bye.